All right, it's recording.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the APTA Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy. This is our hospital-based and neonatal special interest group town hall in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are recording this session and it will be live, well, I'm sorry, not live, but recorded and available on our website, Academy of Pediatric PT, for further review. We have two topics tonight. The first topic will begin here just a few seconds on the inpatient or the acute care side of our practice. That's why hospital-based and neonatal SIG, John Greenwood, who's here as our hospital-based SIG chair, and myself, Bertie Gatlin, as the neonatal SIG chair, are hosting this together because many of our practice areas, of course, cross paths. And then from 7:30 on, we will address more of the outpatient clinic based because that falls under John's area in the hospital. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat room. We have two of our leaders monitoring the chat room. And we're going to open the session with a video recording by Dr. Cindy Miles, who is our Academy president. So I'd like you to, everybody please mute their microphones if they're not muted, or John will be muting you just so we don't have that background.
Bertie, I'm not hearing the audio on that.
Oh, you're not?
Hey, Bertie, you need to make sure that you select share computer's audio when you share your screen.
Okay.
There should be a little setting that allows you to toggle on share computer audio. It'll be in your share settings, likely in your toolbar on the bottom. There might be a little caret next to share screen. I can't tell you exactly because I don't have that capability turned on right now.
Okay, hang on just a second then.
It's in the Zoom settings, not in your video settings.
I don't know how to go back to that. Do you, John?
So I think if you go to share screen, and when you select the screen to share, there should be a little button at the bottom that you click that says share computer audio.
Okay. Okay, guys, let's try this again. Let me know if you hear it. All right, can you see?
Yep, we can see the video.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to all members of APTA Pediatrics, APTA Pediatrics Special Interest Groups, and everyone else participating. On behalf of the APTA Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy, we appreciate you joining us for our Special Interest Group town halls. I hope that this finds you all safe and well as we negotiate this uncharted territory and with the GPS. No one could have predicted how fast and to what extent we would find ourselves in one of the most unprecedented and extreme challenges that anyone in our lifetime has ever experienced. It's difficult to watch all that's happening across the globe and feel so helpless. As we forge ahead into this unknown, the Academy leadership has planned a series of town halls, which were kicked off last week with 2 regional school SIGs, as well as one with myself on Tuesday. I've been so thankful to be connected to our association, to the Academy, and all the individuals involved. It's been a wonderful source of comfort during these unprecedented times. We've received many questions across all practice arenas, and telehealth has quickly become a familiar word and a new intervention platform. APTA has been wonderful to work with. Our Academy, our special interest groups, our advocacy and practice directors, and your entire board have been very busy collaborating with APTA to create documents and resources, which you can find on both of our websites, both APTA and the Academy of APTA Pediatrics. In addition, the private practice section has opened their website. They're providing a wealth of information and resources for all members and non-members as well. All 18 APTA academies and sections have formed an advisory panel. The goal is to share resources across all practices without duplicating efforts. This collaboration reinforces that we are all in this together. I urge all of you to focus on what we know as opposed to what we do not know. Focus on what we can do as opposed to what we cannot. Look for the facts and ignore the fear. As pediatric therapists, we are acutely aware of the impact on children and families we serve. We work with some of the most vulnerable members of our society, many of which have become more vulnerable within the past 3 months and for sure will be going forward. I believe when we emerge, we will discover an unprecedented landscape within pediatrics over the next few years. Now more than ever, we must come together as a profession, as a community, as a nation, as one world. Now more than ever, our APTA President, Dr. Sharon Dunn's belief that we are better together is imperative to lead us through this chaotic, uncharted territory. On a recent call in mid-March with component leadership, Dr. Dunn mentioned, adversity does not build character, but it sure does reveal it. Dalai Lama has said it's under the greatest adversity that there exists the greatest potential for doing good, both for oneself and for others. Our Academy leadership must position ourselves for the impact of this pandemic. As an academy, I believe we need to be proactive and explore our members' present needs and where you will all need the most support. I've been looking forward to this series of town halls for us to gain a pulse on where individuals are and what our next steps should be to support everyone. This crisis will affect this generation in ways we cannot foresee. We have to keep looking for the light, no matter how dim. We will emerge better than expected or predicted, and I am confident each of you will continue to give of yourself to reveal the true character and capacity that you all possess to serve our families as we all come together. Now join me in welcoming your special interest group leader.
All right. Is the screen shared, John?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, great. All right. Well, again, thank you to Cindy for our kind of introduction during this crazy time that we're all in. And just want to introduce John Greenwood. He's here as the representative of the hospital SIG, and then myself as the neonatal SIG chair. We also have our leadership team on as well. John, do you want to kind of talk through your leaders real quick?
Sure. So with regards to the hospital-based SIG, we have myself as chair, Katie Lammers as vice chair, and Kelly Shane as secretary for our hospital-based SIG. And you can always reach out to any of us for any information. Our contact information is on the hospital-based SIG website.
Yeah, and like I said, my name's Bertie Gatlin. I'm the neonatology SIG chair, and Kara Bonowitz is our secretary for the SIG, and Anjali Gupta is our vice chair for the neonatal SIG. We also have Patty McGee and Raquel Keithley on tonight. They are our communication and kind of PR representatives that are helping us within the SIG, and then specifically here for monitoring the chat room. So if you have any questions, again, please post them in the chat room, and we can kind of move forward with our kind of discussion tonight. We have, John and I came up with a kind of an agenda to kind of move us forward with this topic, but we don't want to sit up here and provide a lecture. We want to, you know, open this up for great discussion, but we want to provide you with some resources that over the last 2 weeks have come available to not only us as PTs, but also the medical world as we deal with this crisis. So we'll kind of talk about the inpatient pandemic planning and operations, both from a hospital-based SIG, where Jonathan is currently working and overseeing his team, and then from my standpoint within a neonatal intensive care unit, which again is hospital-based, but we often have many of our NICUs in adult primary hospital settings. So we have a little bit of some challenges with our neonatal therapist right now. So we'll kind of combine neonatal and PICU. We'll also talk about some staffing challenges and service care, as well as communication with our employees and associates. And then we're not going to talk a lot about PPE, but we do have that on there as well. We wanted to start with some of the resources. Our resources really are built from the CDC and what they set as a precedence for taking care of the COVID-19 crisis in all settings. In pediatrics, I feel like we probably have a huge challenge because we cross so many environments, right, John? And so we really have to address all of these environments, and that's why we have such great leadership with Cindy, allowing and kind of focusing our discussions as leaders to say, you know, these town halls are what we need to provide that information to our members and our non-members. We also have the resources from the APTA and then also from our own Pediatric Academy. So we'll be going back and forth between these resources. But I also want to reinforce that you need to also make sure you know your Tennessee, that's where I'm at, your state practice and government websites, just so that you are, 100%, following the Practice Act within your state as things change and evolve, and we're kind of treading new territories and treating through telehealth and reimbursements and things like that. And we'll talk a little bit about how that is affected by our compact law in a little bit.
So I'll first just say I keep looking off to the side to make sure nobody else is waiting in the waiting room. So I apologize for my not looking right at the camera. But the CDC and prevention really is our gold standard of where we're going to be looking for information. And that's where a lot of our institutions are looking at setting up their local and responses to emergency management. And so just as a general premise, we're all looking to minimize our chances of exposure both in the community and in our professions, looking at standard precautions for transmission so that we can make sure that we're properly protected with our PPE, with our personal protective equipment. And all of our areas, both by geography as well as availability of these resources are going to vary a little bit. And so just to be aware of that, and a good place to go back to is the CDC, as their strategies change over time as well as PPE becomes available or not available in certain instances. The other thing in the hospital setting to be aware of, as well as outpatient, is different precautions as it relates to aerosol generating procedures. So because the coronavirus is a droplet virus, a droplet-based virus for contact precautions, when we aerosolize it, it can become an airborne. And so just being aware of what those are, and also making sure that we're training and educating healthcare professionals, as well as others in the community, right? So it's not just enough to have an ear loop mask, but you actually have to wear it correctly and use it at the right time for it to be effective.
We're going to kind of start with what we know right now. So we do have some specific links through our American Physical Therapy Association and then the Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy, as well as our Academy of Acute Care Physical Therapy, that have developed wonderful resources for not only preparing us for a disaster management, but also for current best guidelines for treating patients who are potentially positive, who are positive, and who have the active COVID-19. So we're not going to kind of go through all these resources, but we want to provide you with these links because we want to really have some active dialogue. But these will be, again, posted on our Academy website. So you have the disaster management plan from APTA. You have this physiotherapy management of COVID-19 in the acute care setting. There is also a wonderful kind of webinar video recording by the acute care section that discusses active treatment with the COVID patients and has some nice discussions at the end. It's about an hour and 45-minute recording. You can find that on the APTA website. And again, I highly recommend you going and reviewing that because it's just as pertinent for the adult population as it is for our pediatric population. And then again, there's some resources by the acute care section. And then this article here that we're going to kind of talk about a little bit more too, as far as physiotherapy guidelines and what we use to help move us forward with treating these patients, not only in pediatrics, but across all populations, and then specifically to pediatrics across all settings.
And just to remember to bring a smile to our faces that we communicate this with our families and providers, but we also talk to 3 and 5-year-olds, right? And so, you know, looking for resources. I've seen some great YouTube videos on how to wash your hands for kids. There's some songs out there, but just thinking about making sure that we're communicating in a way that our younger patients can understand as well. You know, even simple things like, why aren't we going to school, right? Can be kind of a big stumbling block for some of our patients.
Another resource that's available is from our Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapy. And this just is reiterating, you know, how our PTs and PTAs are valuable members of this crisis team. And so stepping up and maybe sometimes not going outside of your practice act, but doing some of those daily tasks that might be asked of us as PTs, that definitely put us in that team role. We also want to think about reaching out if we are in situations or settings that are specific to the COVID and with other types of needs for personal protection. We need to also reach out to our specialized PTs that maybe are in the cardiovascular and pulmonary area, maybe those that have their certifications. They can play an important role in giving us information. And again, some of those are actually posted within our APTA website. We do want to know also, though, that this isn't really the time to begin a new area of treatment within, you know, your hospital setting or whatever your setting is, specifically tonight, hospital and NICU. We'll talk a little bit about this as far as NICU, but, you know, while we can provide a great value to this pandemic, we also don't want to place ourselves into a new setting that's uncomfortable for us and can put us in you know, kind of a scary role. We also want to think about, as the Federation states, we need to start looking for and planning the recovery phase. I feel like, and many of my colleagues feel like, we're going to have, you know, many patients who are going to be referred for debilitation due to the virus or other types of roles that they have not been actively in therapy. So looking at that influx of specialty clinic visits and or referrals to PT, whether it's, you know, inpatient, outpatient, EI, or even school systems.
I think it's important too that when we talk about communication is that we think about, you know, having that truthful and transparent communication with everybody. I think we need to understand that employers, employees, families, friends, all have different levels of fears and anxieties regarding this pandemic. And so recognizing that, I think, is important. And also looking to make sure that people have their basic needs met. On a regular basis, I'm hearing about physical therapists from different parts of my state and different parts of the country who are dealing with either unemployment or redeployment to other areas. And I think just making sure we're communicating openly with our peers and our families on what's happening, but also making sure that we're disseminating factual information. I think a lot of times myth or what we see on the news may or may not be what needs to be conveyed to keep a calm and scientific head about us, to be thinking about things and how we deliver care to our families in a way that makes sense, you know, that follows our principles and our ethics and our process, but in a way that you know, follows the guidelines set forth by APTA and CDC. And also making sure we're compassionate. You know, it's okay to have people feel uncomfortable in delivering care, especially in the acute care setting when you may be dealing with patients who are contracting COVID or recovering from COVID, and what does that mean for me? And allowing for an open dialogue with all employees is really important. And we want to be able to have those questions asked, no matter what those questions are.
We wanted to bring this article just for you guys to review and look at it. It was screening guidelines for physiotherapy involvement with the COVID-19. And again, this is a great resource. What John did is he actually kind of took the article and then took out the scenarios and applied it to our pediatric field. So how does it relate to us as pediatric physical therapists? Well, we know we have, especially in our neonatology world, we have pediatric therapists who are treating in adult-based facilities, and that can be challenging, going both ways, both pediatric therapists being asked to treat adults or to, like John said, be redepartmentalized to another department, or again, adult therapists being asked to cover the pediatric unit, the NICU. We also have, standalone pediatric institutions that have challenges where treatment's developmental in nature and caregiver education. How are we transferring the education to the bedside caregiver when we have some limitations with the number of caregivers that can attend, or you may have a hospital that's on, strictly lockdown and there's no visitation. Again, visitation restrictions, therapy tools, single patients. This one is important more so in maybe PICUs in the hospital setting, but also in our NICU, we may have certain tools or therapy toys that we use, and making sure that those therapy tools are assigned to that patient and it does not leave the room. Even, with proper cleaning, we have to keep that exposure limitations. And then discharge planning challenges. This COVID-19 physiotherapy guideline really talks about the challenges that we're having with our referral to other PT settings outside of the acute care hospital. And again, what are the challenges within pediatrics specifically? Well, outpatient department referrals, just like, the PRN staff or the therapy staff may be they may be furloughed, or they may be only having one or two therapists. And then as well, EI, have the EI program within your state transition to telehealth or teleintervention. And then behavioral concerns that we have, going back to kind of what John was saying, we need to remember we are talking with children, and then also making sure that our parents are given the resources and tools to maybe, work through some of those behavioral concerns that are showing up because the children, are in one environment for extended periods of times. There's very nice resources available through, our academy under different sections to look at alternative tools for education. There's, again, the telehealth and the intervention programs that are implementing right now through Zoom or other mediums. The big conversation that I keep hearing is HIPAA confidentiality and making sure that that's in place, whether you have some form of an electronic signature or some other form of agreement to that telehealth. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we get into some of our discussions.
And then I think we look at, how are we staffing our inpatient units? So is it business as usual? Do we have a full staff? What does it mean when our census changes? So if our census is 50% of what it usually is, what does that mean for our staffing process to cover all of the needed inpatient units? And also thinking about, we're not seeing those non-essential surgeries. What does that mean for our per diem staffing who may have regularly scheduled times or might be covering different shifts? Are we shifting treatments into the ICUs or out of the ICUs, depending on how your hospital is set up? Do you have an ED? Are you accepting a lot of patients through your ED that are getting admitted now with COVID or rule out COVID? And then cross-staffing, as Bertie had said, kind of thinking about the changes that might happen if I take a therapist who's usually working 40 hours a week in the NICU and asking them to go treat on the ICU or go treat on an orthopedic floor. So what does that mean for our training and our ability to cross-staff? I think we also have to consider more emergency preparedness. So thinking about pandemic triaging. Does that mean that we have to change our plans of care and our frequencies for our patients outside of what the normal construct is for that model of care? Do we develop different inpatient teams? Do we have two teams that come in throughout the week so that they don't cross over and potentially have community spread of any virus, thereby maintaining two separate inpatient teams for your hospital? Or do we staff by unit so we don't have therapists moving from the ICU to oncology to general surgery? Do we have designated therapists just stay on a unit? So again, not to cross-contaminate throughout the hospital. But I think there's a lot of areas, including, the last bullet of if you have a therapist who gets sick or a series of therapists who get sick and now need to self-quarantine for 14 days, what does that mean for your staffing plan? So when you think about all of these areas, I think it's important to evaluate where you are currently. Do you have enough staff? And then how are you going to utilize the additional staff that you have that may not be needed for patient care? Do you have a per diem pool that you can allocate in emergency situations to cover illness? So I think staffing planning is done at all levels, and I think it's something to just be aware of, be it on a unit, as a hospital agency, but also thinking about all of your outpatient staff who may need to cross-train to inpatient if that's available to you.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit now specifically about the NICU. So right now, what we know that is concerning the NICU therapist or the neonatal therapist, and most of this information has been either through direct email contact to me or some of my leaders in the neonatal SIG, or also through social media, through our Facebook page. We know that the limitation of our parents visiting, many hospitals are setting the guideline that only one parent can visit at the bedside, and that parent must be the same parent for that day. So they cannot, come in and out, one parent or the other. But since we've kind of hit a lot of the peaks, we also know that many states have had a lockdown on their hospital where they're not allowing visitors at all. So these are really the only two types of visitation limitations that I have heard of or my leaders have heard of. If you have any questions or concerns, we'll talk about those. We also know that there's been some concern about the PPE that's utilized for our COVID-19 infants. And really the PPE procedures are not changed, whether it's for COVID-19 or any other type of RSV or aerosol transmitted patient. We still should have, the precautions in place to protect not only ourselves, but transference of that pathogen from one client to another. Most of the COVID-19 infants have been in the PICU, as far as what I've been told. We have infants that have been born to mothers who are COVID-19 positive, and they are being held in isolation within the NICUs. But I haven't heard of any exacerbation of that COVID-19 outside of what their normal prematurity, diagnosis might, lead them to having some type of respiratory needs. The biggest concern I think that I'm hearing about personally is that generalist PTs, and again, these are the NICUs that are based in hospital organizations, so typically our level 3 and 2 NICUs. We have generalist PTs that are being asked to cover the NICU. Many NICUs out at the hospital may have PRN staff or maybe limited staffing of therapists that are maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and therefore they're not the full time. And so the adult therapists are being asked to cover the NICU. And that's a big concern. It is a reality though, so it's one that we can continue to reinforce that neonatal is an advanced practice area. It's one that takes mentoring, and it takes guidance to ensure that our most fragile infants are taken care of in a way that is safe for the patient. But at the same time, we need to offer resources and mentoring, and especially the resource and the reinforcement that this is an advanced practice area. But if that therapist is being asked to go into the NICU, then maybe offering the reinforcement of the limited types of patients that therapist could see, maybe more of the well baby nursery type of clientele. Again, those are some concerns that are really kind of hitting us as the leaders through the NICU right now. We also know that the impact in the NICU and the PICU specifically, and John can kind of talk more on the PICU setting. Again, we kind of talked about staffing, how to orient our new therapists to the NICU that are shifted from other areas. A therapist going from a orthopedic section to the NICU or to the surgical based NICU, there still needs to be some type of orientation and mentoring going on. We also know that changes in delivery to follow-up developmental clinics are still going to be as challenging in a NICU or a PICU setting. The currently many, if not all, of the neonatal developmental clinics are canceled or have been put on hold for the time being. So it's imperative that these kids are being not only referred to early intervention, but that, we have some type of expedited system to get them seen. Now, this again is all, dependent on the telehealth and the teleintervention capabilities within your state. But that's been a big probably the biggest secondary concern that I'm hearing is how are these babies and where are these babies going to get follow-up? We also know that there's the family support in education, secondary just to that limitation of the visitors. How can we as NICU therapists provide some type of telehealth or teleintervention post-NICU discharge? I don't know if it's going to be a reimbursable type of opportunity, but I think it's a due diligent type of responsibility for us as neonatal therapists to reach out to some of our families that are being discharged from the NICU and PICU to see how they're doing, continuing with whether it's a positioning or a handling or recognizing behavioral signs, just to have that continuity of the care that may have a longer gap before they are getting into their follow-up programming. And then again, some of the current discussions, and we kind of like to open up the floor now to the chat and answer questions. Discussions regarding the priority of patient care. I've been putting out just about probably every other day questions regarding neonatal therapists. Have you been asked, to kind of prioritize your patients in the NICU? Or has the NICU been put, in an unprioritized level so that you could go and cover other areas? What type of parent ed are you doing in the NICU right now? I know with the one parent visitation, I've heard that many parents or many neonatal therapists are doing more handwritten bedside planning. And then again, we kind of talked about the adult care generalist being asked to cover the NICU. And then what are your follow-up recommendations? So I'd like to open up the floor if you, have any questions regarding, oops, sorry, I went to the wrong way. Regarding, specifics within your neonatal unit, and then or the PICU, and John can answer some of those.
So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. It's usually located at the bottom of your screen if you're new to Zoom.
Patty or Kelly, are there any questions?
Not so far.
Okay, we'll go on and let John talk a little bit more about specific hospital-based questions because, we're kind of tag teaming because I feel like this is such a close-knit area. but there are some specific areas I'm sure that John's experiencing that we as neonatal therapists may not be experiencing.
So some of the things that we think about for hospital-based outside of our NICU is certainly the levels of care. So we do have a lot of our orthopedic patients, or what we'd consider maybe non-essential surgical patients that we haven't been seeing in the hospital. So as you can imagine, what it tends to mean for us from a hospital-based standpoint is we're seeing a lower census because the ORs aren't quite as busy, but we're seeing a higher acuity. So our patients that are in-house are typically the ones that have time-dependent needs, right? They're in there because they need their meds delivered, or they need an emergent surgery. So I think when you're thinking about the population that you're seeing in the hospital, where a therapist may have gone and seen a variety of patients in their day, right now we have to consider when we're staffing that they're seeing all of the most intense, most needy patients, and ones that probably tend not to be on a 2-day or 4-day expected stay within the hospital, then discharge home with an easy expectation. So some of those areas of staffing and areas in the hospital that we have to think about are around supporting our staff and making sure that we're staffed well enough to see that census, and even though it is lower, that it is at that it's a higher acuity of those patients that we're seeing. The other thing that we're aware of is that there is certainly an emotional toll in thinking all day long about what PPE I need to be wearing at what time. Is this room that I'm going in an ear loop mask with gown and glove and eye protection? Is the next room an N95? How do I store my ear loop mask while I'm putting on my N95 and then taking off my N95? So I think all of those questions all day long in your own head take you away from the normal routine clinical care that you might be able to provide so quickly and easily. And the last area that I find quite interesting in the hospital setting is that we stood up a virtual platform for all of our patients in the hospital using Zoom. And so a lot of our families, because of either they were on precautions because they had a COVID positive patient, or a caregiver may have been COVID positive, or they were being screened out for it. And so we had a lot of rooms where we had a lot of specialists coming in and out, and we were able to utilize and leverage the technology of Zoom so that if I'm wanting to consult with a family and I had certain questions, I can actually Zoom from outside the room to inside the room and not have to don more PPE and use more PPE and have it spared so that we're not using it needlessly. Are there any other questions just with regards to acute care, hospital-based questions? Or is anybody in a rehab model of care that they're seeing things a little bit differently?
John, there is a chat in there from Dawn, if you want to read that about her facility.
Sure, thank you. So Dawn's just asking, for our facility, we often see for follow as a bridge prior to EI visits. Since these are fragile infants, how does one prioritize between telemedicine versus in-person clinic visits? My facility is prioritizing as those with critical needs. My concern is liability if family wants an in-clinic visit and risks for infection. Is the facility liable if an infant were to get sick? So I will, I won't speak from this sounds a little bit like maybe an outpatient transition to outpatient care or to EI. Maybe we're seeing the patient in outpatient until EI picks up, because there are some windows of getting children active and eligible for early intervention services. So I would first, and we will talk more about this on the outpatient side, but I would first make sure that in your state, in your practice act, that you can follow those patients in a non-clinical setting or in a virtual setting without having an established relationship with that patient. And I guess the best way to describe it is we will see these children in our outpatient facilities as well. Our current premise, and we are taking a bit of a conservative approach, even though there is some back and forth over can you do new evals via telehealth, is we are only seeing patients who have an established relationship with us as a physical therapy department. What that means is if that patient had gone from inpatient and they're going to outpatient, they have a relationship with our inpatient team and they need some follow-up care. As Bertie had said, a televisit might be okay, right? A virtual visit might be okay in that situation. But I think if we had somebody coming to us who was referred from a pediatrician and they needed outpatient therapy, we're gonna need them to come to do an in-person clinical visit so we can be assured that what we're evaluating and assessing is done in a in-person visit to make sure we're seeing what we see and writing appropriate goals and making a determination if that family is appropriately set up for outpatient based virtual visits for the future.
I think, right, John, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you can pull up the outpatient stuff.
Sure, sounds good.
And just to address, I know there's not, because now I can pull up the chats. I know if there's been some discussion within the NICU babies going home, is just like John alluded to, if that patient has already been established, then the telehealth component of a follow-up phone call from the neonatal therapist, it has occurred. It's very few who have talked to me regarding this topic. So I really want to reinforce to the neonatal therapist to ask your hospital system, and then again, looking at your practice act, that your state has approved televisits, whether it's an e-visit, that it's typically only reimbursed by physicians, but I know in Tennessee we're working on that e-visit right now. We do have the telehealth visit availability with certain codes and modifiers attached. But as a neonatal therapist, if we can at least make a follow-up phone call after that baby goes home, then we can at least, check in on the continuity of care and maybe even provide the parent with some knowledge that they may not have regarding, what is the EI, right, programming right now in your state, or what is the outpatient department expectation, or what's the timeline. So again, I think that many of our parents are just, afraid because of their lack of knowledge, right? So if we can at least give them some education, then maybe we can help bridge this gap until we know a little bit more regarding our return of the follow-up clinics and other types of outpatient settings and our EI referrals for evaluations of new patients. Because I know our EI system in Tennessee has been concerned that babies coming out of the NICU, just like John alluded to, it's a new baby, so it's a new evaluation. And that, even through the service coordination, there's been some challenges there because we really are not doing, we are not doing evaluations via telehealth, only with that established patient. So I don't know if there's any comments to that. Here it says that the hospital systems are lagging behind the private outpatient clinics. In fact, our hospital is trying to get the physicians up and running first for all their primary clinics before any specialists. And that doesn't surprise me. I mean, John, you kind of alluded, your physicians are already setting up, doing e-visits or.
Yeah, and I think when you look at some of the information that's come out from, the private practice section, I think a lot of the, even some of the leveraging, can you guys hear me okay? All right. Some of the leveraging of the information for getting telehealth or telerehab set up, was founded in the CMS 1500 forms, the billing forms for outpatient private practice. And not a lot was really mentioned about the UB40 or the hospital-based billing charges and how that relates. And so I think there were a lot of questions that even if hospitals were ready to go from a technology standpoint, there were still some underlying billing questions that needed to be answered.
Yeah, and this is from Caroline Breton. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. This really concerns me is when hospital systems are told, you know, they're not going to participate in telehealth, and they've just been pulled, you know, from their consultation clinics. So, you know, my question would be to seek out maybe, again, if it's a new patient, that's the challenge with referring them to another organization. If the telehealth, you know, kind of consistency across all telehealth venues is that we're not doing evaluations. So, you know, that's concerning. I don't know, Caroline, where you're from, if maybe there's somebody that can assist her, you know, in the same state. And Jan responds that each person needs to check their own malpractice insurance to see that therapist, you know, that your practice is covered for telehealth. And that's important too.
So I think a lot of the comments over telehealth and outpatient we will be getting to certainly in the next section, because I think this is a hot topic that from what I'm gathering, a lot of people around the country, you know, we're all dealing with not only the national regulations that are coming out through CMS, but we're dealing with our local and state governments and our private insurers, and all of those in the mix really make it a challenge to come up with a one-size-fits-all, whether you're in New Hampshire, Texas, or California, being able to say this is how you should do it. And that's the whole point of these discussions, is to make sure that we're sharing what we know, and again, what somebody might figure out tomorrow, we'll want to share again.
Yes, very much so. Caroline says she's in Maine, so I'm unsure what home therapists are doing, but we are not allowed as inpatient therapists to do any telehealth visits, including our CF clinic, our NICU clinic. We're trying to give our providers as many resources as we can. And, you know, Caroline, that's the best that you can do right now, then that's perfect, because again, we're meeting the needs of that patient, you know, during this emergency crisis. So thank you for your comments. All right, John, do you want to move on to outpatients now?
I can, yeah. And if you want to monitor the chat so I don't keep reading, it's all interesting things, but I'll get distracted. I'll go down a rabbit hole and not be able to get back.
Yeah, and Patty, you're still helping monitor too, right? Okay, great.
So feel free, if you're monitoring the chat, to interrupt as we go along. I like dynamic conversations. It's a lot better answering those questions in the moment, because I think sometimes it's harder to even get back to them. But we're going to do a similar thing with regards to our outpatient model, outpatient-based services, and understanding that even though we are seeing that there's a difference in discrepancy between hospital-based and freestanding private clinics, that the hospital-based SIG does cover all of that. So we'll talk a little bit about outpatient pandemic planning. I had one of my managers tell me the other day that she's pretty sure I'm never going to want to write the word pandemic planning again. But pandemic planning and operations, staffing plans for outpatient-based service delivery and what that looks like. Again, ensuring we have good open communication plans with our employees and our patients, and the discussion about PPE. And at the very end, because this is where most of the questions I'm sure will lie, is in the area of telehealth and what we're doing so far for telehealth. But again, I think we're forging ahead and setting the stage for the future, and we can talk about that as well. So what are people concerned about? What are outpatient therapists concerned about? So, you know, there's a lot of information if you watch social media or reading your emails, different types of communication platforms. But some of the big things I'm hearing is, you know, how do we make a decision on patient care plans? Whether it's a financial decision because my institution has decided that we're staying open and it's stressing our therapists out and our families out, and I've I'm only seeing 1 or 2 patients a day because no families want to come into our clinic? Is it, how do we make a decision based on community spread? You know, maybe I have a small clinic and with a lot of therapists and a lot of patients. How do we make that decision there? Or is it a clinical decision, right? And how am I able to balance that clinical decision making and saying, well, what types of patients can come into my clinic and what kinds of patients should stay home and not come into my clinic, and they'll be okay for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So I think it's important that we look at that. All of those decisions are important, and they're all important because it has an implication not only on patient care, but also on our ability to have therapists stay employed and be able to resume once this pandemic finishes. I think Bertie had a great point, is that once this ends, all those non-essential surgeries now become essential again, and we're going to be filling the ORs and the inpatients, and eventually all those patients will be coming to outpatient. And if we're not there to provide that care for the backlog of patients that have needed our care and then accepting all these new evals, we're going to have a problem getting the best outcomes we can for our patients. The other area that comes up a lot is what PPE is utilized in the outpatient setting. What's appropriate to use in the outpatient setting? Should my therapist wear a mask, gown and gloves, eye protection? Should patients be coming in with a mask on? So these are on the minds of therapists as they're out in the clinics treating. And then can I provide virtual visit options to my patients? And maybe we have the technology to do so, but does my employer, does my agency allow it? Does my state allow it? Do my payers allow it? So all of these things are on the minds of the therapist trying to just deliver care for our patients. So these current discussions include regarding who needs to be seen face-to-face versus telehealth. And I think that's one area where we want to think about how do we triage and make decisions, and make a decision that's appropriate for the service area you're in, and takes into account your practice guidelines, your practice act, your reimbursement structure, and if that's supported, but also, that it's consistent so that all of your therapists are using a similar structure or construct to make those clinical decisions on whether or not an in-person visit, face-to-face visit, or a tele-rehab or telehealth visit is warranted. So we might use things like, are they urgent and essential versus non-essential? I've heard the term also, is this a time-sensitive intervention? Meaning, if they don't receive the physical therapy that they need or that they're required, are they going to regress, or are they going to not progress and get the benefits of that surgery or that medical intervention that they just underwent? And I do just need to continue to emphasize, and hopefully you'll hear it enough, but that all state practice acts are not equal. And so just being aware that there are resources on the APTA website regarding telehealth. You can just type in telehealth and you'll get their website. It's also linkable through the COVID website on the APTA.org website. And it's just a plethora of resources, and you really need to know your own state's guidelines and whether or not you're allowed to practice telehealth or e-visits. And we can talk a little bit about what those differences are as well. So I wanted to share my current construct. This was developed through my leadership team and some of the clinicians. It includes both PT and OT, just because we treat together in a lot of instances in terms of how we triage patients. But what we did is we had already developed a urgent, meaning that the patient was needed to be seen the same day or within 24 hours within our clinic before leaving. And that's usually a patient who maybe is post-op and seeing the doctor and is coming out of a cast and needs to progress weight bearing before going home, or maybe they need to see OT and have a splint made for protection before leaving our area. So those are our urgent patients. And our high patients are patients that really, when we get the referral, we feel clinically need to be seen within the week in order to manage their physical therapy success, their outcomes. And so these are a lot of times post-op or post-concussion, some acute diagnoses with different sequelae to their diagnoses. But what we did in our clinic is we said, when this first rolled out, we said, all right, anybody who falls into our normal urgent, or high categories, we're going to say still need an in-person visit. They still need a face-to-face clinical visit to establish and to work on their plan of care. It may be determined at that point we weren't able to provide virtual visits. We were just getting set up early on. Now that we are set up, we're able to offer these families who I might typically see 3 times a week in my outpatient clinic, now say, all right, we'll see you once a week face-to-face and twice a week virtual, so that you don't have to come into the clinic as often, and we'll follow your care, still progressing you, but know that that could change. If all of a sudden we need to progress you quicker, or you're doing something not appropriate at home in terms of technique, we may bring you back in for a face-to-face visit. Then we moved into our medium area. So the first rollout was just taking all of the medium and low patients, and we actually canceled them. We said, would they be okay waiting 4 weeks if we were closed for 4 weeks? And lo and behold, we're closed for 4 weeks and then some. But we made that initial decision that we would put those patients on hold because we didn't think there would be a decline in their status if we then resumed in 4 weeks. But after time went by, you know, time is sometimes an enemy for some of our kids, and they're not able to get to the not able to make the progress with their home programs, or maybe they've maxed out on their home programs if we're lucky, and they might need to have some type of intervention from their physical therapist. So we're now in the process of, with our medium and low patients, contacting them via phone, finding out how their therapies are going, and if they need, if they've either progressed to the point where they should have a virtual visit to progress their care, or they're progressing or they're regressing and not making the gains that we would expect, we're calling them back in and saying, let's have a virtual visit with your primary therapist, and we'll try to progress you virtually first. And if that doesn't work, we may have to have you come back in. So again, this is just a construct. It's not meant to say this is the right decision-making for every clinic, for every population all around the country, but it was a starting point for us. And so we took this and we used it with our clinical staff to say, all right, do these make sense? We can come back to the model in a little bit, but I did want to just share one more slide that did have some other links in it, as well as you know, just talk again that the APTA does have a lot of good resources, but there's some other resources as well that are out there. WebPT has had some really nice posts through their blogs on how to bill for telehealth and teleservices. InTouch EMR has also been another one that's been really updated on their trying to speak nationally about the resources that are out there. So that's another place to go. And then there's also been a lot of buzz around the PT Compact. So there are states that are already well established in the compact. And for those, a lot of them, and again, I will just encourage people to reach out to those individually. But the ones that are already enrolled in the PT Compact are a lot of times allowing you to apply for your licensure in that other state, but then waive the waiting period so you can start practice right away. So where that might impact us in the future, and I will say my organization is not there yet. We're still doing all of our care within the state. But let's say I have a few patients from a state that's within the compact who come to us for care, and then they go back home, and we're not licensed in that state. There's a question on whether or not we can provide that care to another state. And so those are some of those areas that are still for us unknown, and we'd love to learn from others and how others are dealing with it as well. So hopefully that at least sets the stage for some questions. So can I open it up to some of the questions from the chat? I have seen it scrolling by rather vigorously.
Yeah, a lot of it's been more discussion, John.
Yeah, they're leaving me out of it?
It's just been really discussion going back to billing and some of those. There's a couple questions here about maybe if people like from other states, what's going on in their states. And all of these resources will be available on our website, either through the hospital SIG or the NICU SIG. Raquel Keithley, she posted, Raquel, you're in South Carolina, right? Okay. Yeah, she posted that there's South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, maybe? Close enough. Will reimburse for the following codes. So she gave a list of codes. So it's more questions, I think, regarding, you know, what type of children can we differentiate between seeing in telehealth versus, you know, more coming to the clinic. I don't know, does anybody else have any questions out there or comments?
As people have more questions, I'll just speak to the fact that there are everybody's going to come up with their own construct based on, I think, the type of practice that they have. So if you're in a private practice that treats a single diagnosis, the likelihood is you're going to find ways that you could do virtual visits or telehealth with those in that area of expertise that you have. I think the best thing some of the confusion that's been out there is in the area of Medicaid or Medicare services, where there was a recognition during this pandemic to cover some of the codes that PTs may typically bill, but they didn't actually want to go so far and say that PTs were under the telehealth provision. And so there have been some discrepancies. And part of it is, you know, what type of risk are you going to take if you're legally allowed to provide care? And you're, you know, for us in our state, the governor made a declaration that, you know, we're going to cover anything that would be face-to-face. Insurance companies should cover and reimburse the same way. So we're taking a leap of faith as an organization and saying, well, we're going to submit our charges as if, you know, it was telehealth, but with the delivery of care on our virtual visits, that it would be like you're face-to-face. So if you're doing Therex, we're going to bill Therex under the hospital. It's a, you know, slightly different code than your 97110, but you know, we're gonna try to bill it through that way. So I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of tele-rehab or telehealth or e-visits, which are a little bit different than delivery of telehealth. And so I think it's important to look at those and how your organization is going to deal with it. But I'm really excited on the forefront that, you know, coming on the other end of this, I believe we're going to show, and I hope we do this as an organization, I think we're going to be able to show that, you know, we had some good positive outcomes from this, and we helped kids and families get through post-op care and, you know, diagnoses, and maybe we didn't have as many face-to-face visits as we would have otherwise hoped, but in the end, you know, the patient was still receiving high quality care and achieve positive outcomes from it, to show the validity of tele-rehab as part of our arsenal of tools in our toolbox.
Yeah, exactly. Jan McElroy wants us to encourage everyone to post your questions. Put your state of residence down, and you can post them on the forum on our website. I'd also like to just kind of go back to the topic. I'm not sure how many therapists that are on tonight. Have you had any challenges with either your generalist PTs being asked to cover your NICU, or has that occurred? What about you guys that are in the NICU? Patty, I know you said you've kind of been.
Yeah, our unit is big enough. Our unit's it's like 100+ beds, and our team of therapists is exclusive to the NICU. There's a few of us that float to PICU and to peds, but that's only a few of us, and our peds floors are actually are smaller. So they're not having us cover back and forth on the same day. But we're lucky that our NICU team is exclusively NICU.
Yeah, and that's kind of the two groups that I'm hearing from, those that our practice really hasn't changed other than, we're exclusive, or we're not going back and forth within the day. We're only in the NICU, or we're only in outpatients, or whatever. And again, I've only received a few emails regarding, and these are the therapists contacting me asking, what type of resources do I need? Where can I go to get these resources? And again, reiterating to anybody that you guys come across, is there's a wonderful resource document on our website. It is under our neonatology special interest group that has a listing of resources for therapists who are being asked to go in the NICU that you can take to your administration, to kind of say this is just the beginning of this advanced practice area. But again, it gives you some resources there. Any other? Say, I am one of 3 NICU PT contractors in a transdisciplinary team. Our contract services have been limited to only 1 PT now, so the staff OTs are covering all the other services. So Jessica, can we, so you're, let's see, PT contract. So you're the only PT in the NICU? And then Katie, our hospital census is extremely low, so we are overstaffed right now. A plan was in place to ensure staff were split between peds and NICU if we have COVID plus admissions, but NICU census is also very low, so it's more of MTO concerns for us. Yeah, and it's kind of amazing. I think I've heard too across the hospital systems, especially the adult labor and delivery departments, that we do have an overall decrease in the number of NICU admissions. I don't know if that's everywhere, but I've kind of heard that. So I'm not sure if there's any correlations there or not. Any other questions? Or Jonathan, do you have anything else we think we need to share?
Yeah, I know there was a question about how has staffing changed, and I think Katie answers that a little bit with talking about some places may feel that they're overstaffed, right? Is that when the census drops, how do you manage that? And I think every institution is different. What I'll say is I think our institution has changed in a very positive way, but has changed 3 times in the past 4 weeks on, processes and what we're going to need and how do we plan for the future. But I think it's important to have that discussion as a team with your staff, because that's anxiety provoking, not knowing, do I have to use all my earned time? Do I still get paid? Am I still eligible for benefits if I don't want to get paid? I mean, there's a lot of HR related questions and concerns that come up, and it's not just PT related, but it impacts us.
Right.
And so, I think any way we can, try to still deliver high quality patient care, and support therapists in not feeling stressed about the other life issues. I see, even with kids in the background, right? I see that we've all turned into homeschool instructors and other things too. So no, that's good. I'm used to it by now. But I do think
kid bombed in our Zoom meetings.
That's right.
and pet bombed. I've been pet bombed a few times.
I will say, just as a strategy that we took on early, as we were encouraged to really focus and say, what are all the things that we could get done by splitting our staff and having people e-work. Now people who are remotely working are doing virtual visits remotely versus coming on site to do them. And our inpatient staff has been split so that we don't have overlapping days, so that we have a team A and a team B that come in on different days, both in PT and OT, so that they don't cross-contaminate. If one person gets sick, I don't have to quarantine my whole staff because we all sit in one one space. So I think there's different staffing models that people, you know, will need to look at that's going to make sense for them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we go, I just wanted to take everybody maybe back to the, oh, let's see, John, can you stop sharing or?
Yep. Or I can get you back there.
Yeah, or just, I was going to take them to the website.
Oh yeah, sure.
And just, you guys can see here where some of the links are, you know, for our COVID-19 information. And then you can kind of scroll down, you see our town halls, SIG town hall meetings will be uploaded on this page. So you'll be able to watch those. You can watch Cindy Miles's town hall from last week and then some of the other ones as well. Going to each of your special interest groups, you can look at the different, you know, information we have loaded. I know our NICU SIG leadership, we're working on our newsletter right now. It's also, well, it was kind of put on hold. We were going to do a welcome because we have new leadership in the neonatal SIG group, but Dr. Jane Sweeney and Dr. Sue Hosh have not left the building though. They are still within our leadership team as advisors and in other support systems. So anyway, we're kind of regrouping around that, but those newsletters will be available. And then again, you can go, what I wanted to highlight, John, go back to the NICU SIG one, that resource list. Even though we do realize it's already time to update it, I believe, Raquel, didn't we say it's already 3 years old or 5 years old now? I can't remember. It's 3 years old, yeah. So it's time to get updated as well. But this neonatal didactic training resource list is a pretty all-inclusive list containing information. If you are being asked to go to a NICU to provide services, please reach out to myself or Cara Bonowitz or Anjali Gupta, Raquel Keithley or Patty McGee, and then we can maybe assist you with someone, not necessarily within your system, but hopefully within your state as a mentor or one of us. And again, just that's my concern, is that it's placing you and the patient as well at some undue risk, even outside of the COVID. And then the hospital SIG, go ahead.
I was just going to say also, Jan was mentioning the forums. You can get to that right from this main website. And then from that forums page, if it'll get me there quickly, you know, we're trying to keep updated with different topics, and there is a COVID specific topic forum that you can enter as well. So you can post questions there, you can answer questions that others post in that area. So you can also get notifications when people reply to your posts, so you don't have to continue to go back to the website. It's a nice feature there.
Yeah.
And then again, I want to just point out for APTA, if you do go to their main website and just type in I've already done it, telerehab, telehealth, you know, it's pretty, you know, pretty quick to get to their.
They got a lot of resources available.
Yeah, so some recommended resources. I always kind of look to, right now, we're in kind of a dynamic time, so they've been great about posting dates. So if you know the last time you went on and you didn't happen to check out this latest, you could go to that. So it's helpful to know for me, because I feel like we're getting information from so many different places all day long. It's nice to be able to go and say, oh yeah, I haven't logged in since the 7th. Let me take a look and see what's happening. So they've been really nice about updating there, and even on their main site, a lot of their updates surrounding the coronavirus has been posted there as well, including resources and links. And a lot of our other academies have been great about sharing information as well. So just to
Acute
reiterate.
care and the cardiopulmonary, yeah, they're both been wonderful.
Yep, healthcare policy is sharing a lot of
Mhm.
their open meetings as well as private practice. And so, now's your time to get out there and look at the resources that are there and be able to see what's going on.
Yes, Cindy says, they're state specific, so that's kind of what we were wanting in the forums, is to put your state down so that we can specifically kind of help people locate things within their own area.
And if you haven't reached out to your local, if you are in a state that you feel is not meeting, the supports that you need, reach out to your local president for a state chapter and make it known, that the only way we can get this moving forward is if, your voice is one of the many that they're hearing from. And you'll be surprised, it's not always hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are making change. It could be dozens. So, reaching out to your state president and asking for clarity from their team, her team, to make sure that we're advocating for what our kids need, and decisions aren't just being made at the adult world level.
Right, and I just want to reiterate, Chelsea is representing our APPT mentoring program, which is our Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapists. We have a waiting list for mentors, so if you are available to help and assist new therapists, novice therapists, or therapists who are just in, kind of a new setting, maybe because of this emergency crisis, please reach out. She has her email here. It's mentoring@pediatricapta.org. Please reach out to Chelsea, CHELSEA, Lasky, LASKY. We would greatly appreciate it. And then Maria had said, of course, all of our APTA staff have been overdrive and probably even further overdrive. So if you get a chance, just maybe reaching out and thanking them for their efforts and all the information that's being posted on our websites. Thank you so much for attending, John. It's been wonderful, unfortunately, during this crazy time. But to put our SIGs together, I think this is the first time we've really reached out and said, hey, look, this is a great opportunity for our SIGs to come together because we're both hospital-based, right?
Same kids, just different parts of the country, right?
That's right. That's right.
So again, please reach out. Let us know if there are any questions that come up. If we don't know the answers, we'll try to resource it out to somebody who might. And again, I think that's the best part of having these SIGs is we're so focused on a unique area of care that if we don't know the answer, we can reach out to others and ask if they've had similar situations and try to come up with the best practice.
Yep. Yep. All right, and I've gotten I've written down most of the chat questions, so we're going to put those into our newsletter that'll be coming out as well. So look forward to that. And if there's anything else you guys need, don't hesitate. We do have another email that's listed on the website. Sorry, I just thought of this. Let's see, it's neonatology at, oh, I'm so sorry, John. Can you go back? Let's see, wait a minute, I've got it up. Is it, John and I can't ever remember this email. It's neonatology at pediatric APTA.
Let's see.
There it is.
Is it under here?
Yeah, just click on your name or my name. I think it'll take it. Of course, I say that, I don't know.
We're learning. So it's
Yeah.
neonatal SIG,
There it is.
all one word, at pediatricapta.org.
Okay, and then it's hospital SIG at pediatricapta.org. But hospital's him and neonatal's me.
Or you just email us and say, hey, you, and we'll find it. We'll figure it out. So, but I thank everybody for logging in. I know, midweek, there's a lot going on, family time and others. So hopefully it was valuable information. And again, Bertie and I will each try to get this posted onto the SIG websites as a resource, so you have all the links that we were sharing on the screen.
All right, I'm trying to copy all the chats real quick so we'll have them. I have learned some go
All right.
arounds.
I'm gonna do the same thing, copy
Yeah.
and paste.
Okay, yeah. I think I got them all, John, so we can kind of.
Awesome. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you,
Oh,
everybody.
there's one last, oh, just thanks. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and everybody stay safe. And we look forward to the next SIG meeting. You can go on the website and look which one's next. I know EI's coming up. I think Trisha's on there. Lori's on there. I'm not sure when they are, but you can go to the website and check them out.
And wash your hands for 20 seconds.
And quit touching your face, which I know I'm doing this all the time as I'm sitting at my computer.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Bye.
night.
Take care. John, you want to stop the recording?
Oh, yes. Good call. Pause, stop recording. It's saving to the cloud, so that means